Okay, hi everyone for the second time. And I'm so sorry for all the technical challenges that kept coming up today. But I think, in the interest of time, thank you so much for being patient. And I think, in the interest of time, today we are going to, I really wanted to discuss some tips and tricks for VARC before we dug into our first RC. But I think, in the interest of time, let's quickly start with our first RC immediately. Okay. And I'll keep telling you tips and tricks as we go through the RC. Okay, so quickly tell me, because I had already put this up, have you all already finished reading this RC? How many of you have already finished reading this RC? Have you finished reading this RC? How many of you are still yet to? We can extend the session, Arithro is saying. Okay, that's very nice. Yes, Arithro, definitely. I have, some things in my mind that I want to cover in this session, and we'll make sure that we complete all of those things. Okay. So, how many of you have finished reading the RC? If you haven't finished the RC, I want you to take a minute and a half more and complete reading this. I think now you can read the last paragraph. Okay, those of you who have finished reading the RC, I want you to try and attempt the first question of the passage. Ankit is saying 8 minutes ka timer. Not for this RC, Ankit. For the next one I will put. Okay, this RC we have already spent a few minutes while I was trying to troubleshoot. So I'll just give a few more minutes and then we are going to start. Shoaib is saying 1. Okay, the rules remain the same, okay? Just like decision making, may I told you, don't write your answers just here. Don't type your answers in the common chat. Just write it down in a notebook. Whatever you feel is the correct answer. I want everyone to have their own independent thinking and come up with their answer. Okay? Here is the next question. And here is the third question. Okay. Okay, now let's start discussing. Those of you who have still not been able to do the questions, maybe you can do it with me, okay? And just like decision making, what I want all of you is to pay attention to how we, the thought process that goes behind solving each of these questions, okay? And you have to identify what is your way of thinking, so you will know if there are any mistakes that you make, where it is that you are making mistakes, and what kind of mistakes. Okay, so let's begin. It's a very interesting RC, especially because it's on consciousness. Okay, so what does the first paragraph say? Okay, so the first paragraph tells us what the topic of this RC would be. Okay, it introduces the topic, which is consciousness. Right in the first sentence we can understand that what this RC is going to be about. Okay, so it is sometimes said that consciousness is a mystery, in the sense that we do have no idea what it is. Okay, so what is the author trying to say in the first paragraph? The author is trying to point out that, it's a very common belief that consciousness is a mystery. But the author goes ahead and tries to challenge it, that is it really a mystery? This is clearly not true, because if consciousness is all about feelings or experiences, then we are experiencing those very emotions and experiences, right? How can we not know what it is when we are experiencing all those emotions every day, right? Those feelings, those emotions are our very own. So we do know what it is. What we do not know, however, is why and how does it exist. Okay, so the author in the first paragraph is pointing out that the real mystery is not really about what consciousness is, but rather why does it exist or how does it exist. Okay, so that is what the gist of the first paragraph is. Let's go on to the next paragraph. What does the next paragraph talk about? The next paragraph talk about how does modern neuroscience handle this topic of consciousness. So the author says that modern neuroscience, what has modern neuroscience done? Modern neuroscience has kind of done a lot of correlation. It has produced information such as which part of the brain can lead to what kind of a feeling or experience. Okay, so for example, they give an example here that if you stimulate ventromedial hypothalamus, it's a part of the brain. You don't have to get very intimidated by the how technical the name is. Whenever you find a very difficult word, if you don't like it, if you find it's too difficult for you, just replace it with X. Okay, so there is some X part of the brain. When you stimulate it, it makes you feel hungry. Okay, so neuroscience can the modern neuroscience has been able to do all of these amazing things. It tells us which part of the brain, when stimulated, can lead to what kind of experiences. This correlation, this mapping, neuroscience has done. Okay, that this part of the cortex, if you stimulate, it can lead to make you feeling happy. This part of the brain, if you stimulate, it causes sadness. This part causes hunger. So this mapping of which part of the brain causes what kind of a reaction, this correlation has been very well established by modern neuroscience. Okay, so what the author is saying is that is not the problem. What the problem is, that is not what we are trying to understand. We are trying to understand what consciousness is and how does it exist. what the neuroscience tells us is which part of the brain can lead to which kind of experience. But why does stimulating a physical organ lead to such kind of emotional experiences? How is this process connected? What does it mean to feel these emotions? These kinds of questions about consciousness cannot be answered yet by modern neuroscience. And this is what David Sharmers has called the hard problem of consciousness. Okay, so what exactly the author is talking about? First, he talks about how consciousness is not a mystery, but the mystery is why it exists. Then the author talks about what is the contribution of modern neuroscience in understanding this consciousness. What modern neuroscience has done is mapping different parts of the brain to what kind of experience it will lead to. But that has not helped us in understanding the core of the matter, the hard problem of consciousness, which is why is a physical entity stimulation causing an emotional experience, something which we call consciousness. Okay, so let's go to the third paragraph. So the second paragraph is all about the contribution of modern neuroscience in trying to explain consciousness and where it has lacked, what it has explained and what it has lacked in explaining. Now, when we come to the third paragraph, what does the third paragraph say? Now, the third paragraph starts talking about a certain group of scientists called materialists. Okay, now, even if you don't understand who materialists are, you kind of can guess, based on, so whenever I tell my students, when you come across a word that you do not understand the meaning of, replace that with something and try and put it in context about what the paragraph is talking about. Sometimes, even if you have never heard the word before, just based on what it sounds like, you can guess. So we talk a lot about materialism, how materialism is bad. Okay, materialism is love for physical objects, the best phone, the bigger house, a bigger car. So basically material, if there is this core phrase, word hidden there, it means something related to physicality, okay, the physical world. So there is a certain group of scientists, okay, called materialists. Now, what do they believe? They believe that consciousness, just like any other scientific phenomenon, can be explained in terms of physical equations. Okay, so science, just like can explain any other phenomenon, can also explain consciousness. But what does the author say? That they have not yet, they believe they can do it, but till now they have failed to do that. Okay, so it says that it has a long history of failure. Now, what is the problem? The problem with materialist approach to the hard problem is, what hard problem are we talking about? The hard problem of understanding why consciousness exists. Okay, so why have they failed? Now, here the author is not happy with something. Okay, so there is a problem that he is pointing out. What he is saying is, the materialists feel they can explain consciousness, okay? But how are they trying to do that? Not by actually tackling the question at hand, but by changing the definition of what consciousness is. Okay, so if consciousness, what initially in the first and the second paragraph, what he defined is the emotions and the experiences that we feel, okay, that we go through, it's the subjective experiences, that is what defines consciousness. Materialists, just because they are not able to answer this particular question this way, what they do is they go and do something very smart. They will go and change the very definition of what consciousness is to something that can be observed and measured. Okay, something like complex behavioral functioning of people. What does it mean? If you cannot understand what happiness is, if you cannot understand the cognitive experience of what feeling and emotion is, you are going to say, you know what, we can't understand the emotion per se, but we are going to relate it to something else, something like how people behave when they are happy. Okay, or maybe more physical aspects of it. How do neurons fire and how does synapses in the brain work what to, to fire neurotransmitters that make us happy. Now these are again physical aspects. Okay, this is the only way materialists they think they'll be able to define something so subjective as consciousness by completely redefining what consciousness is into something which can be observable and is more physical in nature. Okay, but that is not what consciousness is. So the author is not very happy about the approach that materialists have been taking to kind of define consciousness. Okay, now explaining look at the last sentence of the third stanza. Okay, explaining complex behavior is an important scientific endeavor. Okay, so the author is saying, I'm not saying that explaining behavior is not important. But what materialists are saying is, if you explain behavior, this is what psychologists do actually, okay? So you understand psychology and you explain psychology and consciousness by understanding behavior of people, right? Now what the author is saying is, okay, understanding behavior of people is very, very, very important, but behavior is not same as consciousness, okay? What it means to feel happy is not same as what you are doing when you are happy. Okay, how you are reacting to that happiness behaviorally is very different from understanding what it means to be happy or what it means to be in pain, what it means to be sad. So we are not really defining consciousness. We are just, in a very indirect way, bending the definition of it to define something else and then saying, by proxy, it's the same thing, but really it is not. Okay, so the third paragraph, what is the purpose of writing the third paragraph? What is the crux of it? The author is talking about how materialists have tried to define consciousness and failed at it. And why have they failed at it? Because their attempt at defining consciousness was by changing the definition of consciousness to something which can be observed, something like behavior. Okay, which is good, but it really is not same as understanding subjective consciousness or why it exists. Now what does the next paragraph talk about? The next paragraph says many scientists and philosophers maintain optimism that materialism will prevail. Okay, so they are saying in spite of failing for such a long time in trying to understand what consciousness is, materialists, they still remain very optimistic. They feel that one day they will be able to define what consciousness is. And what makes them so optimistic? It's because throughout history, there were always phenomena that people first thought are very mysterious. Just like you feel consciousness is very mysterious. Once upon a time, people thought fire is mysterious, light is mysterious, chemistry is mysterious, life is mysterious. When science was not able to explain all of these phenomena, right? Until the day that science actually did. And then you felt, oh, it's not so mysterious anymore at all. Right? So throughout history, we have a long history, a very glorious history where a lot of physical phenomena were first thought mysterious, but ultimately physical science was able to crack it. We were able to explain it in very scientific and physical terms. We put down what energy is, what matter is in equations to understand it, right? And once we were able to do that, they were not mysterious anymore. So materialists, philosophers, everybody in that way believe that one day we will be able to most likely break down consciousness too, even if we have not been able to right now. Okay, so this paragraph is all about why materialists continue to be optimistic that they will be able to crack what consciousness is, even though till now they have failed. Next paragraph. So what does the next paragraph talk about? Now the next paragraph is a very, it's kind of a very core paragraph to the RC. Okay, it explains why the author feels that materialists are just not getting what consciousness is and why physical science has not been able to explain consciousness so very well. Okay, so it all boils down to Galileo. So what the author is saying is, now initially, what did people think? Matter has got so many sensory qualities. A rose is red, okay? Or flowers are sweet and smelling. Or paprika or chili is spicy, right? So when something has got all of these sensory qualities, when matter has got all of these sensory qualities, how can mathematics explain? How can natural science explain, right? Physical science, how can physical science explain matter when matter is full of all of these subjective and sensory qualities, right? How did Galileo solve this problem? Galileo said that, what the problem is? It's not the matter that has got all of these sensory qualities, okay? The matter does not have sensory qualities. All of these sensory qualities are actually present in the observer, the soul of the observer, or here in this case what you can imagine as the mind of the observer. So it's not the tomatoes or the rose that are red, okay? You are saying there is something within you that you are perceiving it as red, okay? So the redness, the spiciness of a chili, or the sweet scent of a flower, these are not properties that are inherently present in the matter. These are properties that are present within the soul and the mind of the individual. The matter is devoid of any such subjective sensory qualities. So once he isolated matter from any subjective sensory qualities, matter could then be explained in terms of mathematical equations. Okay, so suddenly physical science was able to explain things like matter, energy, waves, all of that, because what Galileo did was he took out the subjective consciousness part from the matter and separated it. Okay, so what he said was physical world does not contain any subjective qualities. All these subjective qualities are part of the consciousness. So Galileo already said that, okay, that he created this entire physical science. How was he able to do that? Because it was all created on the premise, the very premise that all the subjective qualities were considered to be taken away from physical matter because they resided somewhere in the psyche, the soul and the heart of the and the mind of the observer. All right, so the entire physical science was born because you took away the subjective experiences from physical substances. Okay, so what the author is trying to say, since your entire physical science is based on isolating subjective qualities of consciousness from the matter, how can the same physical science now explain consciousness? That entire physical science was created, Galileo created that entire stream of science on the premise that consciousness is not part of it. Okay, so how can the same physical science be then used? So what the last paragraph says is, so Galileo did not say that color does not exist or emotions do not exist. Okay, he never said that, he never doubted, he never denied the existence of sensory qualities. Okay, so the last line is very, very, very sarcastic. The author in the last line is saying, if Galileo were to time travel to the present day and he was told that scientific materialists are having a problem explaining consciousness in physical terms, he would no doubt reply, of course they do, because I was the one who created physical science by taking consciousness out of the physical world. The entire physical science has been created only because I took away the consciousness and I said it's not part of the physical world. So how can you use the same physical science then to explain something so subjective? Okay, they are very, very, very different. So it's very strange. So author is basically highlighting that what are these materialists trying to do? Okay, they are trying to use physical science to explain consciousness when the entire premise of how physical science was born to explain all of these physical phenomena was based on how Galileo took out all kinds of subjective qualities from matter and the physicality of it. Okay, and now we are trying to use it to understand consciousness. I mean, that is very strange. All right, so what is the whole purpose that the author has written this passage? What is the essence of the passage? So when we are going to talk about understanding the essence of the passage, number one, you have to understand what is the main theme that the author keeps coming back to again and again. Okay, so the first reason why we make a mistake in understanding what is the main point of the passage, or what is the essence of the passage, or what is the core idea of the passage is, sometimes we pick one paragraph where a certain thing was being explained and we feel the entire passage is about that. Okay, whereas the author may have just used that as an example to make a point, but the bigger point, the whole purpose of writing the paragraph is something else. So always ask yourself, why has the author written this passage? What exactly in the end, through saying all of this, was he trying to convey to me? Because the author would repeatedly try to come up to that point again and again. Now, in this passage, what I see is the author keeps talking again and again about how materialists are very optimistic that they can explain consciousness, but they are very wrong. They are failing again and again, and he is trying to explain the entire reason what he feels is wrong, why materialists will never be able to explain what consciousness is, because physical science and consciousness are fundamentally very different, right? So how can you use physical science to explain consciousness, right? And he does not agree with this very optimism that materialists have, that one day they are going to be able to explain consciousness. The only way, he keeps saying, is the only way they can explain consciousness is if they just change the definition of what consciousness is, or they may try and explain the more physical aspects of it. But what exactly does it mean to feel uh, those experiences, go through those experiences? This very subjectivity of experience and feeling something is not something that natural science, he feels, will be able to explain. All right, so let's go through the options. Number one, materialists redefine the hard problem by changing the issues. Yes, he does talk about it. The author does say that materialists always redefine, just like they have redefined consciousness. Okay, but is it what the essence of the passage is? The essence of the passage is more about how the problem of consciousness cannot be solved by materialists, and he tries and explains why. Okay, he has written this passage to explain to you how he feels that materialists will not be able to explain or solve the hard problem of consciousness, and he has also given you his own reasons why he feels so. That is the crux of the passage. So option number 2 talks about the hard problem cannot be solved by materialists, right? So yes, this was the main essence that the author was trying to tell you, that he doesn't feel that the materialists will ever be able to solve the consciousness ka hard problem, because materialists are scientists who are practicing natural physical science, and physical science was created by stripping out every aspect of subjective and sensory quality away from physical matter. So how can it explain consciousness? All right. Number 3, materialists can explain the reasons humans see a particular color. This is very, 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 focused. The entire passage is not about how materialists can explain we can see a particular color. Okay, materialists and philosophers agree on the concept of consciousness. No, not really. In fact, he is saying they don't. Materialists have completely redefined what consciousness is. Okay, so they don't agree to what consciousness is. Materialists, in trying to prove that they can define what consciousness is, they have just changed its definition. So the author does not agree that philosophers and materialists agree on on the concept of what consciousness is. The hard problem can best be solved by segregation. Now this is like to just throw you off. The segregation word and the concept has not even been introduced in the RC. Okay, so here the correct answer is option number 2. Okay, let's go on to the next question. Which of the following is most likely to be an example of the hard problem? Okay. Feeling the heat while holding a glass of hot water. Experiencing joy after doing well in an examination. What makes us tired after walking for 20 kilometers? Why we prostrate in front of a deity? Why do humans take birth? Okay. So the how many of you, can someone tell me what answers have you chosen? I want you to quickly write down in the chat while we discuss this. What is the answer that you have chosen? Okay, so option number 1, feeling the heat while holding the glass of hot water. That is something very sensory and physical that can be explained biologically. It's there are skin receptors on your biological nerve endings, and that causes you to feel heat. There's a heat transfer, and biologically it can be explained. It's not something that I would say is something very, very, very subjective, close to experience. Okay, experiencing joy after doing well in an hard problem का reference समझ में नहीं आया. Ankit is saying hard problem का reference समझ में नहीं आया. What do you mean by that, Ankit? So why are they calling it hard problem of consciousness? Is because it remains mysterious how something so physical like a brain, okay, or various other physical parts of the body, how can they lead to something so amazing like feeling those deep emotions? Okay, so why do we feel joy? Okay, how is our brain able to make us feel that emotion? Brain is made of neurons, and just by stimulating neurons, I mean, the pain that a mother feels, let's say if she has lost a child, all of those emotions are huge and so intense. Why do and how do we get all of these emotions? Okay, because human body is made of flesh and bones, right? All physical things. So from where does this consciousness inside our mind come from? And that is the heart problem, which physical science is not able to explain. All right. Why do humans take birth? Why we prostrate? A lot of you are saying number 4, why we prostrate in front of a deity. That is more of a cultural experience. Okay, so since you have been a kid, you might have been taught. No, number 4 is also explainable. Okay, why do you fold hands in front of the god? Because you have been taught to pray that way. It's more of a cultural context. Okay, so prostrate means to lie down in front of a temple or a deity, with your face down, flat on the stomach. So that is something that we are culturally imbibed into doing. Okay, so that is more of social conditioning. Since you were born and you were growing up, your parents have imbibed this, कि बड़ों को पैर छू के उनका आशीर्वाद लेना है. It's a belief system, right? So belief is something that is, you don't feel that. It's more of something that is inculcated within you. It's more related to the cultural and social norms. Okay, it's not so much of a subjective experience. All right. Experiencing joy after doing well in an examination. Now, this I feel should be the correct answer. Why? Because here we are talking about all, consciousness is all about feeling emotions, right? So why do you feel pain? How do you feel joy? What is it that you feel when you smell, your favorite biryani? That feeling of, I just want it, wanting something so bad. All of these are very subjective experiences. How do we feel that? What does it even mean to feel so much of happiness, to feel so much of pain? These are all aspects of consciousness. Dopamine rush can explain this. Yes, so Ayush, this is exactly what the RC is talking about, right? So how neural synapses and release of neurotransmitters do something. So what does dopamine do? It causes a physiological reaction in your body, right? Your heartbeat may increase. Physically, what happens to your body because of that dopamine, because of those neurotransmitters, that is what biology can explain. But dopamine release करने से वो that feeling of joy कैसे आता है? Okay, it's biology who has said that, when people are feeling very happy, there is a certain neurotransmitter called dopamine, which they have found is present in abundance in our body, right? But how is that dopamine related to that feeling of joy? Who is going to explain that? Why dopamine release say that exhilaration हमें क्यों feel होता है? And what does it even mean to feel that exhilaration? It's so difficult to even put it in words for me, because it is something you just experience. You can't explain it. What is it that you're feeling, right? So these are emotions: happiness, joy, pain, exhilaration, that feeling of loss. Why is a neurotransmitter making you feel that way? A neurotransmitter, adrenaline, can make your heart pump, right? Your heartbeat can rise, your BP can rise. But what is this feeling that you're feeling? That is the subjective part of it. Okay. So the next question is, which of the following statements can be inferred from the passage? The passage argues that science could uncover all the mysteries in the world. No, the passage is not arguing that science could uncover all the mysteries of the world. First of all, we are not even talking about all the mysteries of the world. We are very specifically here talking about consciousness. Okay, so that is a very far-fetched, very generalized option. Okay, so we are going to eliminate that. The passage argues that science could uncover all mysteries of the world by giving alternative explanations. Okay, now again, here we are not saying that science has uncovered all the mysteries of the world by giving alternate explanation. The author only complained that materialists have tried to explain consciousness by changing its definition, right? It's not that they have done that to all. We don't know that. Even if they have done that, it's not mentioned in the passage. Okay, so that is option number 2 and eliminate it. Number 3, what does number 3 talk about? Number 3 talks about passage argues that science could never uncover all the mysteries of nature. Again, a very generalized one. Are we really talking about all the mysteries of nature? Whether or not it will uncover it? No, we are talking about something very, very, very specific here, and that is the hard problem of consciousness. Okay, so number 3 is also out. Number 4, the passage argues that science and consciousness are two different domains. Now, yes, this is very similar to what the author is saying. The author is saying that science, which is physical science, is built on a different premise, and consciousness is completely a different domain. Physical science was built only by separating consciousness from, the physical science. They are very, very, very different. Hence, the correct answer here is number 4. What does number 5 say? Passage argues that nature is so mysterious. I mean, nowhere here does it talk about nature being mysterious, right? So we are not even going to look at that. So option number 4 is the correct answer here. Okay, so it was a very, very, very interesting passage. What is it that we have learned through this passage? We have learned through this passage, number one thing that I want you to learn is how to understand what is the core essence of the passage, the central idea of the passage. Okay, ask yourself, why has the author written this? Okay, has the author written this only to talk about Galileo? Has the author written to only talk about consciousness? What is the central idea that the author is trying to tell me? The author is trying to persuade you about something here. What is it? Which is consciousness and physical science are very, very, very different, which is why materialists will not be able to uncover what consciousness is. All right, so with that, let's go to RC2 immediately. Okay, those of you who are done reading the passage can attempt the first question. Okay, I hope all of you are attempting the questions by yourself. Don't just listen to my logic of what the correct answer is. You need to actively think for yourself. Okay? Here's the second question. Here is the third question. Last 1 minute. All right, now let's go through this passage in detail. Again, a very, very interesting passage. Let's find about what this passage is about. Okay, so the first question talks about it. I mean, the first sentence, sorry, talks about it. What is the first sentence? Does having a mood disorder make you more creative? Okay, so this passage basically is talking about, is there a possible link that exists between mood disorders, which are psychological disorders, and creativity? Okay, so what is the author trying to ask in the first paragraph? The first paragraph is all about the author saying that, a lot of people wonder and ask this question whether having a mood disorder increases creativity. Okay, so if you have any kind of a mood disorder, do you become more creative? Now this question, the author says, is very, very, very difficult to answer, because you know what this question is saying? In order to find the answer of whether a mood disorder is making you more creative, what you need to do, if there was a switch to put your mood disorder on and off, you would put the switch on, you will measure the person's creativity. Then you will put the switch off, and without the mood disorder, you will measure the person's creativity again, right? And then you will see, oh, when the person was experiencing the mood disorder, was he more creative as compared to when he was not experiencing mood disorder? Right? So we cannot do that though. There is no switch. There is no, you cannot really predict when a person is experiencing a mood disorder and whether or not. So you cannot really find out if mood disorder is making someone more creative. Right? So what the author says is, a much better question to ask here would be, individuals who have mood disorder in general, do they show more creativity as compared to individuals who do not have mood disorder? Right? Now that is a comparison that we can actually do. So you collect data on people who have mood disorder, you collect data on people who do not have mood disorder, and then see how creative each group is. And then you will know whether people with mood disorders, are they more creative than normal people or not. Okay, so the first paragraph, what is the gist of the first paragraph? The gist of the first paragraph, the author is kind of approaching the question of whether people with mood disorders are actually more creative than people who do not have mood disorders. Right? Let's go to the second paragraph and try and understand what the second paragraph is talking about here. So what does the author say in the second paragraph? He says that, there have been a lot of studies to try and answer this question, if people with mood disorder are more creative. But the results of these studies are very mixed. There is no real answer. And why is the result mixed? It depends upon, according to the author, the method that you have used. Okay, so what the author says is, if you try to compare the creativity levels, the inherent creativity between people who have mood disorders and people who do not have mood disorders, then there is not much of a difference that occurs. Okay, so usually the creativity level has been found to be same in people with mood disorders and people without any mood disorders. Those kinds of studies have not really found any difference. But the difference actually comes when you take creative occupation as a proxy to creativity. Okay, so what does that mean? If you feel that working in any kind of a creative occupation means that you are more creative, then if we just see in different kinds of creative occupations, are there more people who have mood disorders as compared to normal people? If yes, then maybe we can, if you use that, then you will definitely find that yes, definitely there are many, many, many more people who have different kinds of mood disorders who occupy these so-called creative occupations. What is basically a creative occupation? Do you know what kind of occupations are called creative occupations? Basically, these are occupations which lets you express yourself. So any kind of performing arts, dance, drama, painting, acting, music, all of these where you are able to freely express yourself could be considered as a creative occupation. Okay, so if being part of creative occupation is considered same as being creative, then those kinds of studies that have used being part of creative occupation as a proxy for being creative have definitely found that yes, There is a difference. Creative occupation people, in creative occupation, there are many, many, many more people who are having different kinds of bipolar disorders as compared to any other occupation. Okay, so the second paragraph is all about explaining to you, how creative occupation has been used as a proxy for being more creative, and how these kinds of studies have then found out that yes, people with bipolar disorders are actually more prone to choosing creative occupations as compared to normal people. Okay, but can, the last sentence of the second paragraph, the author is asking, can we really use creative occupation as a proxy for creative ability? Okay, so what the author here is questioning is, now these studies very nicely have used creative occupation as a proxy for creativity. Just because there are more moody people and more people with mental disorders and bipolar disorders, choosing creative occupation, based on that they are saying that yes, it is possible that they are more creative. But is it really same? Working in a creative occupation, can it be used as a proxy for being creative? Can you say, in other words, that just because you are working in a creative occupation, it means that you are more creative? So the author is questioning this assumption that these studies have taken, that both of them are essentially the same thing. Being part of a creative occupation means that you have more creative ability. So in third paragraph, he talks a little bit more about it. Okay, he talks about why he has his doubts about why he feels that being part of a creative occupation may not be the same as having more creative ability. Okay, so let's see what the last paragraph talks about, because that is the core, the heart of the this particular RC. The creative occupations considered are overwhelmingly arts, which frequently provide greater autonomy and less rigid structure than the average 9 to 5 job. Okay, so what is the author saying? Is it perhaps possible that these people who have got bipolar disorders and different kinds of mood disorders are जानबूझ के selectively choosing these creative occupations, because the nature of these occupations is such that it provides greater autonomy to them? Okay, because people who have got this bipolar disorder, they cannot maintain a certain routine and consistency. They are moody, they are unpredictable, so they need a profession which will give them a greater deal of autonomy, a greater deal of flexibility in how they express themselves, right, than a regular average 9 to 5 job. Okay, so if you compare what the job requirements would be from an artist, a painter, or an actor, or a stage theater performer, compared to, let's say, what a 9 to 5 coder or a developer, software developer has to do, of course, people who have got these mood disorders, they would feel that these kinds of jobs suit their temperament much better. So maybe they are deliberately choosing these professions because the structure and the demands of these professions are such that they are way more suitable to the temperament and personality of the people who are experiencing these bipolar disorders. Okay, so it is the nature of the job that makes them more conducive for these individuals to thrive in these professions. Okay, because the demands that are put on them in these professions are such that they are able to perform slightly better as compared to the average 9 to 5 jobs of the other profession, where you have less flexibility, more rigidity. Okay, so he talks about how the American psychiatrist Arnold Ludwig has has suggested that the level of emotional expressiveness required to be successful creates an occupational drift. Okay, and demonstrated that the pattern of expressive occupations being associated with greater incidence of psychopathology is a self-repeating pattern. Now this line may seem like a little complicated. I'll break it down to you. What it is trying to say is actually very simple. So what this XYZ psychiatrist is trying to tell, has actually said is, there is a self-repeating pattern that happens, and he's called something called occupational drift. Now what is this occupational drift? They have explained in the next two sentences. Occupational drift is, a certain occupation is more conducive to a certain type of individual. Okay, so let's say if being an artist, or being a theater person, or being a musician is more conducive and it suits the temperament of people with bipolar disorders, more and more people with bipolar disorders are going to choose that profession. Okay, now once more and more people are choosing that profession, it kind of becomes like a self reinforcing loop, because already so many people are present. It shapes the culture and the expectations of people in that profession. So now that already so many people with bipolar disorders are present, there are already so many stereotypes that artists are moody, artists are like that, so all of that has probably come from somewhere, because a lot of people who are doing these jobs show a certain kind of a pattern in the way they are behaving. So it's kind of a self-reinforcing loop. The more number of people like that are present, the more it attracts other similar kind of people to join that kind of a profession. Okay, so here he's given an example where he's layering the professions out. So what he's saying is, compared to scientific professions, the number of people with psychopathology, which means people with some kind of a psychological disorder, psychiatric disorder, there will be more number of people in performance arts as compared to science. Okay, so arts gives you more flexibility and freedom to express. So as compared to science, you will see people with different kinds of psychopathological disorder will choose arts. Now within arts also there are so many professions, right? So when you compare architecture to, let's say, something like visual artists, you will see that visual artistry allows you more freedom of expression. So the level of psychopathology that you will see among visual artists will be more than architectures. Now within different kind of visual artists also, again he layers it. Okay, abstract artists, where the level of expression could be even more, you will find more number of people with psychopathology present. Okay, so as you keep going deeper and deeper, the more expressive the demands are that is being put on the person because of the profession, the more likely it is that that kind of profession is going to attract people with mental disorders, because they need that kind of a flexibility and structure, okay, to thrive. Okay, so what is the author trying to say? It's not that they are joining these kind of professions because they are inherently more creative. They are joining these kinds of profession more because of self-selection, because they feel these kinds of professions would suit them better, their temperament better, their demands to thrive will be met better in these kinds of professions. So the entire premise that author was talking about, these studies in the second paragraph, these so many studies that have happened that equate being part of a creative occupation is same as being more creative, the author is questioning that presumption. Is it really the same? What he feels is, you may not necessarily be part of a creative occupation just because you are more creative. Okay, on the other hand, people with these mental disorders may be joining these creative occupations because these occupations are providing them greater autonomy and more flexibility to suit their temperament. Okay, so it is more of self-selection that these people are doing. They are choosing to go to that profession because of different reasons, may not be because they are inherently more creative. So why has the author written this entire passage? Okay, what is the premise of this entire passage? In the entire passage, the author is talking about how he doesn't feel that being part of a creative occupation is same as being more creative. If you are going to use that kind of a logic, that just because there are more mentally ill people and people with different kinds of psychopathology, those kinds of people are present more in creative occupation, therefore you are going to make the assumption that mental disorders make you more creative, then that cannot be true. Okay, because he has clearly explained that this presumption itself is wrong. Being part of creative occupation is not same as inherently being more creative. So is the author saying that there is no relationship between mental disorders and creativity? Not really. He is not really giving you his final stance. The author is saying, not saying anything. All he is saying is, if this is the reason that you are going to choose to explain and prove that mental disorders, mood disorders leads to higher creativity, then it is wrong. Okay, unless you come up with a better explanation that can come up with this kind of a causation, this explanation does not work, because author has clearly explained why creative occupation and creativity are not the same thing. Is it clear? So the first question, which of these would undermine the passage's main argument? Okay, so let's go through it. Mood disorders do not lead to creativity. Okay, so this is something that the author is kind of hinting. He's not really convinced that mood disorders are actually causing creativity. What he's saying is we do not really have any solid evidence as of now. So it is not undermining the passage author's main point. Okay, it's kind of hinting towards what the author is also saying. The flexibility of creative occupations makes them more appealing to people with mood disorder. Again, number two is again something very similar to what the author is already saying. The author is saying that the creative occupations are flexible, more flexible, which is why people with mood disorders are attracted towards these occupations, right? So it's not undermining, it's kind of supporting author's main argument. What does number three say? Mood swings in creative professions is less prevalent than in non-creative professions. So here this is saying the opposite. What is the sentence saying? That creative professions, the author said that people with mood disorders are more likely to get attracted to creative professions, right? Now this sentence, however, is saying that in creative professions, mood swings are less prevalent. It's saying opposite of what the author is saying. So this, in this question, option number three is something which is clearly undermining what the author is saying. So here the answer would be 3 only. Is that okay? Yes. So let's quickly go to the next one. This was, I think, an easy one. This question was. Did any one of you find it difficult? All right. What can be inferred from? All of these can be inferred from the passage, except individuals with mood disorders often do better in creative job profiles than in regular 9 to 5. This is what the author is saying, right? The author is saying that 9 to 5 jobs are a little difficult for these people with mood disorders. So these individuals will do better in creative jobs. So it can be inferred. Number one can be inferred. Number two, in creative professions, people with mood disorders are more creative than those without mood disorder. Now, is the author really saying this? What is the sentence saying? Within a profession, you will have all kinds of people. What did the author say? That a profession, a creative profession, is more likely to attract a lot of people with mood disorders because they find it convenient to work in that profession. But does the author say that in the same profession? So what they, let's say you pick up any kind of profession, let's say an artist. Okay, so what the author is saying is somebody with mood disorder is more likely to get attracted to a career like becoming an artist because it gives them more flexibility and freedom of expression. But as an artist, if you compare someone who has an artist who has a mood disorder and an artist who does not have a mood disorder, is the author saying that the person with the mood disorder will be more creative? Not really. He has not even compared people with mood disorders to people without mood disorders. This entire RC is about understanding how working in a creative profession is not same as having higher creativity. Okay, nowhere in the passage does the author ever mention that he feels that within a profession people who have mood disorders are more creative, right? So this cannot be inferred from the passage. Okay, so I would have clearly chosen number two. I would not have even looked at number 3, 4, 5, but for completion's sake, let's just read it once. Mood disorder is more prevalent among people in creative occupation than in non-creative occupation. That is That is actually true. In creative occupations, mood disorder is prevalent. That is what the author is saying. An architect is more likely to have mood disorder than a botanist. Of course, botanist is a scientist, architect is more like an arts. So in the last paragraph where he kinds of starts separating different kinds of profession, he says now that between science and arts, you will find more people like that in arts. So this is clearly true. Same as with option number 5. Abstract painter is less likely to have mood disorder as compared to an interpretive dance performer. So interpretive dance performer is a higher level of expression. So you will have, more prevalence of people with mood disorder in that form as compared to an abstract painter. So number 4 and 5, somewhere it's already explained in the last paragraph. That is something what the author is already agreeing with. So it is only number 2 that the author does not agree with. Quickly, number 3. Everyone in a mental asylum is potentially a great artist. Will this make author's contention fallacious? Author's contention means whatever point the author is putting. Okay, will it kind of undermine his argument? Okay, will it make it flawed? Will it make his reasoning flawed? Okay, so this question is, which of these argument is going to undermine the author's assumption or the main point? What is the author's main point? That people with mental disorders are getting attracted to creative job opportunities because these jobs provide them with greater flexibility and expression, something which a normal 9 to 5 job cannot. These people cannot perform better at 9 to 5 jobs, the regular ones. That is why they are more attracted towards the creative and artistic jobs. That is his main core point that he's trying to tell us. So any of these sentences, if it disproves that what the author is assuming is incorrect, that will be our answer. So everyone in a mental asylum is potentially a great artist. Now this is not really disproving the author's main point. Again, you have to keep asking in questions like this, what is the author's main point? The author's main point is about how, creative jobs attract more mentally ill people. So this is not talking about the main point as such. So we are not going to choose this option. Patients in mental asylums prefer time-bound repetitive job. Now here it is talking about something which the author is also talking about in his main argument. When the author says that he believes that 9 to 5 jobs are not that conducive to mentally ill people. Mentally ill people are not going to be able to perform very well at these 9 to 5 jobs, which are very rigid. It kind of requires you to behave in a certain way, one of which is doing time-bound repetitive jobs. Okay, it's very constrictive. It does not let you express yourself. Okay, so you have to follow rules and you have to do repetitive tasks. And what the author is saying is, because of all of these things, 9 to 5 jobs are not suitable for mentally ill people. But option number 2 here talks about, if this was true, if patients in mental asylums, these are people who are mentally ill, they prefer time-bound repetitive jobs. That means 9 to 5 jobs should be fine with them. There is no problem. So this entire assumption that the author is making, that mentally ill people are moving towards creative job because they will not be able to thrive in 9 to 5 jobs, this is undermining that belief, that assumption, right? So if option number 2 was correct, it is seriously going to make the author's argument flawed. It will not make sense. The entire passage the author has built based on that assumption. If that is not true, then the entire passage does not hold true. So the correct answer here is option number 2. Okay, creative geniuses never end up in mental asylum. Again, this is not undermining the main, it's not even talking about the main point, which is creative jobs. And the reason why mentally ill people are more attracted towards it. Those with a creative spark will land up in a mental asylum. This kind of completely reverses the causation. They are saying creativity causes mental illness. We are talking about whether mental illness causes more creativity. Okay. The last is, creativity is a form of bipolar disorder. Okay, so creativity is a form of, here you are saying something completely different. Here you're talking about, how you're saying is, it's not even about whether creativity increases, sorry, whether bipolar disorder increases creativity. Here it's saying that creativity itself is a form of a mental disorder. Okay, so number two is something which directly attacks the line of argument that the author started with, which is creative jobs attract people with mental disorders because they cannot thrive in 9 to 5 jobs. Okay, can we swap people in mental asylum with people with bipolar disorder? Yes, 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 of course, Sriyesh. So here, when they keep saying people in mental asylum, basically they are, it's kind of a proxy for people having different kinds of psychopathology. It's the same. Okay. So who goes into a mental asylum? People who have some kind of a mental problem, some kind of a psychopathology. So it's the same. So what basically they are, whenever they say people in mental asylum, think of it as people with some kind of a mental disorder. All right. So let's quickly move on. This is a very short caselet. It's a critical reasoning question. I'm going to give you 3 minutes to do this. There's a lot of information here. Read it slowly and carefully. Read it twice and read it thrice if you need to. अंकित इज सेइंग डिटरमाइन और अंडरमाइन के बीच में बहुत कंफ्यूजन रहती है. ओ अंकित, सो व्हेन यू गेट कंफ्यूज्ड बिटवीन टू वर्ड्स दैट सीम वेरी सिमिलर, you can create a visual around it. Okay, so undermine, you can think of it as underscore. It's something that goes below something, right? So undermining someone is more like गड्ढा खोदना किसी के नीचे. ओके, सो गड्ढा खोदोगे तो वो इंसान गिर जाएगा. राइट, यू आर क्रिएटिंग अ गड्ढा बिलो दैट पर्सन, अंडर दैट पर्सन. ओके, सो व्हाट डज इट मीन टू अंडरमाइन समवन्स आर्ग्यूमेंट? यू आर काइंड ऑफ निगेटिंग व्हाट दे आर सेइंग. आप उनको गिरा रहे हो, आप उनके लिए गड्ढा खोद रहे हो, आप उनको बोल रहे हो कि आप गलत हो. Right, so one way this is a strategy I used to use for difficult words or similar words that used to be very confusing. Correlate them to something funny, something easy, something simple, something that you can relate to. Okay, so undermine means गड्ढा खोदना किसी के लिए. Okay, उसको गिराने के लिए. That means you have to prove them wrong. Ah, don't write the answers, please. Let others also think. Okay, just because we have three fours written here does not mean four is the correct answer, to all of you who are still attempting. Okay. One more minute and then we'll discuss this. Okay, is everyone done? Yeah, they do tend to, their RCs do tend to cluster a lot around, psychology related, philosophy related, more abstract kind of topics, because they are excellent topics and excellent genres, when it comes to testing your true comprehension. Okay, so they will give you less of factual RCs, and they will give you more of abstract RCs and persuasive RCs, where you will have to read between the lines and you'll have to understand complex thinking thought processes. They are slightly more difficult, right? Philosophy and psychology related and abstract RCs. A lot of you are very used to reading technical RCs and science based RCs, so I think they deliberately go with those genres. Ayush is saying he'll stick with four. All right, let's find out. Okay, so a lot of examples are given here. There's a lot of comparison, there's a lot of comparative data that is given here. Okay, so what is our job? Our job is to kind of find out what is happening here. What is the pattern? What is that one theme that is coming up through these examples again and again? So, how do they put you off guard? There will be some random themes that will come up in some examples, but they will only be there in some examples. They will not be there in the other examples. Okay, and though there will be some themes that will be there in 2 3 examples, but still there will be 1 or 2 examples which are different from them. Your job is to find a pattern which is present in all of these examples. Okay, so we'll do that. What is the caselet telling us about? More people have signed up for Harvard online courses than they people who attended physically in all 377 years. WebMD has got more monthly visits as compared to all doctors in the US combined, right? On eBay, online dispute resolution settles more number of cases than the entire US court system. Okay, Huffington Post gets more traffic on its website as compared to New York Times website, which is almost centuries old. British tax department uses a fraud detection system with more data than what British library has, and British library is very very old, right? Millions of people use online tax software instead of accountants. Autonomous flying robots are building structures out of bricks by themselves. So we have here Accenture is hiring 750 hospital nurses, and Deloitte has its own massive corporate university. Okay, so first when you hear it, it may feel like, there are a lot of random themes that are coming up. There are new forms of service delivery. There is basically a tech enabled platform. There are large scale digital systems that are coming up and functioning now. There is automation. There is data driven operations that is happening. Organizations are now performing roles that were traditionally done by other institutions and professionals, right? For example, accountants being used for tax filing. Now online software is being used for tax filing. Okay, so let's look at the options and let's see which of these options talks about a pattern that is common to all of these. Okay, it is not vague. We will see 2 3 5 are vague, so eliminated. All right, so let's go through it. What 1 and 2 is about, talks about what old firms can do to survive and how old firms are dying. Is the data really telling you that the old firms are dying? Yes, there is some kind of comparison that is happening, right? And in option 2, sorry, there are certain kinds of examples that tell you that yes, the newer forms of institutions are having more traffic, but does it really say that the older forms are dying? Has New York Times died just because Huffington Post has more traffic on it? Not really. So the examples are not really about firms dying. Are the examples telling you about how old firms and what they are doing to survive? Maybe a couple of them, right? A couple of them are saying that, but it's not really discussing strategies that the old firms are doing to survive. Okay, yes, every statement is in some way about evolution, right? How automation is taking away jobs traditionally done by humans. Now there is only one example where some robots are actually being used to build a structure out of bricks. Okay, that is present in just one example. Other examples don't really talk about automation taking away jobs of humans. Okay, how new organizational forms are emerging. Yes, now that is one theme that I do feel is very, very, very present, across all options, right? So all of these options are about, in some new ways, organizations are evolving into something new. Now either it could be evolving in form of robots coming up, or new in form of how whatever was done previously by accountants and professionals, now it is being done by online software, or in some way something that was old is slowly parallel to it, new forms are emerging to do the job, to do the same job probably better or in a different way. So how new organizational forms are emerging is certainly a theme that is present across all of this. Okay, so number four is the correct answer here. Number five, how professionals are getting replaced by technology. Not really. Again, here this is just one example where accountants have gotten replaced by online software that helps you register your tax, fill in your tax, but not all of them. So if you look at it, it wasn't a very difficult question, even though it looked initially that these are all haphazard examples. When you start going through the options, you start seeing that no, it's not how firms are dying, how firms are surviving. These are options are not really present in the data. Okay, so the only thing that was present in the data was new forms of organizational forms emerging. All right, so with that, let's go to the next critical reasoning. Done. Okay, so let's see what this caselet is talking about. Yes, country X is basically, I think it's a typo. Treat country X as country Y only. Okay, there is no country X. Yes, yes, it should be country Y only. Okay, right. So what is this caselet talking about? The caselet is saying that during the elections and immediately after the elections, the word depression has been searched too often on Google online. Okay, so online search keywords related to the word depression have significantly increased very close to the election, during the election and right after the election in country Y. So based on this premise, based on this fact, what the author is saying in this caselet is, because uh, the online history is a very accurate measure of what people are actually behaviorally going through, and what they say is people who are experiencing depression, they are very, very, very likely to search for that word. Based on this assumption, they are correlating that because the search word depression has become more common, more people are becoming depressed close to the election. So election is a very traumatizing event. Okay, it is potentially depressionogenic. My god, it's the first time I've even read that word and I'm a psychologist. Okay, so depressionogenic is clearly is something which causes depression. Okay, so that is the main premise, that is the main argument of the passage. What is the question asking you? Which of the following statement most seriously weakens the conclusion? जब ये इतना capitalized में most seriously weakens देखते हैं ना, then understand कि there must be more than one sentence here that must be weakening the conclusion. But we need to choose the one which is the most serious one amongst that, okay, which has the highest impact. So let's go through it. What is our conclusion? More people, we are thinking that people people are considering election as very traumatic, and it potentially is causing more depression in country Y, right? So the first option is per day sales of antidepressant drugs is constant across the year in country Y. Okay, so if that was true, the entire premise that more people are getting depressed gets undermined. Okay, so if more people are getting depressed, then logically there should be more antidepressant drugs being sold. But option number one is saying that the number of antidepressant drugs actually being sold in the country is the same, right? And that is a very good indicator. Antidepressant, how much of antidepressant drugs are being sold can be considered as a very good indicator of how many people are suffering from depression. So if that has not changed throughout the year, how can we assume that the election caused more number of people to become depressed? So it clearly very, very, very strongly weakens the main argument of the passage. So number one stays. Many people do not use the internet in country X. Now, even if that was true, I mean, we are saying that even amongst the people who are using the internet, as compared to before, the number of times the word depression has been searched is much more. Okay, so try and understand the comparison is the people who were using internet before, how many of them were searching the term depression, and the same people are using the internet now, how many of them are searching for the word depression. Okay, so even if not a lot of people are using the internet, we are still saying that more number of people are searching for the word. That means more number of people are feeling depressed. So it's not really doing anything to weaken your conclusion. Okay, election is a festival in some countries. People happily choose their leader. Well, this is not about some country, right? This caselet is specifically about country Y. So even if that was true, even if in other countries election was a festival, it is very possible that in country Y it was very stressful. Okay, so option number 3 is again also doing nothing to undermine the main argument. Number 4, depression related advertisements are on the rise during and just after the election in country Y. Now this could be a good option. Okay, this could also in some way undermine the main premise of the argument. So what is the argument? The argument is that more number of people are getting depressed because of the election. And how are they coming to that conclusion? Because more number of people are searching for the word depression. So what number 4 is doing is, it's kind of contradicting the initial assumption based on which we are concluding that more people are getting depressed. It is giving you an alternate explanation to why people are searching depression. It's because there are so many ads related to depression that are running during the election that people out of curiosity might be searching for that. Okay, so that is a counter explanation given to the basic assumption based on which you came to the final argument. So yes, it is weakening. But if you look at number one, between number one and number four is directly attacking the main argument. It is saying that no, more number of people are not depressed, and it's giving you concrete evidence that the drug sale is the same throughout the country, whereas number four is indirectly countering that assumption, that argument, by attacking the assumption that you began with, that more number of people are searching for it. Okay, so between number one and four, if you have to think which one most seriously weakens, impact factor is much higher for number one, which is why number one is the correct answer in this given situation. Okay. Ritro is asking, is it a clinical term in psychology, depressionogenic? I am not really sure. Ritro, I have never really heard of it. Probably I'll have to Google that too. Okay, so many years of being a psychologist and I've never really heard anyone use that word. But it is possible, maybe it is there present somewhere in dictionary, even though not very used very often. Okay, so I'm also very curious now, and I'm definitely going to Google it, or you can Google it and tell me if it's a real word. So with this, I think we are going to end today's class. So what we did was we did 2 RCs and we did 2 critical reasoning questions. What I do want to, before we end the class, I do want to highlight is some important points that I feel students keep making mistakes on while attempting RCs. Okay, so it's very important that you understand that. The first mistake that students attempt is skimming through the RC passage. Okay, skimming means reading it very quickly. एक बार ऐसे बस जल्दी से ऐसे देख लेते हैं what is the passage about. That just wastes your time. It does not serve any purpose. Okay, so unless you are skimming through the passage to try and choose, so there will be let's say there are 4 RCs and you want to attempt only 3, and there are certain genres that you completely want to stay away from. Let's say you don't want to get into philosophy related RC, so you will want to quickly go through RC and see philosophy related to nahi hai, jo philosophy related hoga wo chhod denge and baki 3 attempt kar lenge. If that is the reason that you are quickly going through the RC, you just need to quickly skim through first paragraph and it will tell you the topic. Okay, so if you are skimming through the RC because you want to choose whether to go ahead with the RC or not, then it is fine. But if you have chosen to go ahead and attempt the RC, it is, within, in your best interest and advantage that pehli baar mein hi you read the RC very properly. Okay, because what happens is when you skim through jaldi and you try to finish the RC in 2 minutes or under 2 minutes or 3 minutes, you haven't really understood the RC. What purpose does it serve? You have not really understood the RC the way it was meant to, be understood. The questions are all going to be based on your deeper understanding of what the author was trying to say. Okay, so a lot of these RCs have only 2 questions, not even 3 questions. So when there are just 2 questions related to RC, they are not going to be factual questions. Right, they are going to be questions which will require you to have a very in-depth understanding of what the author is trying to say, what was said and what was not said but was implied, right? What was the flow of arguments and logic that flowed. All of those deeper understanding you are not going to get by skimming through. Right, so you skim through, then you read the first question, and then you go back and start reading the RC all over again, because of course you don't know the answer to the first question because you have not really read the passage in great detail. You have not done justice to the passage. So basically what it does, it wastes your time. Whatever time you spent skimming the passage the first time is wasted, because anyways you have to go back and read it in proper depth. Right, so that is just wastage of time. So never try to skim through an RC that you have decided to go ahead with it. एक ही बार पढ़ो, बट इतने अच्छे से पढ़ो, धीरे धीरे टाइम लेके पढ़ो कि आपको समझ में आ रहा है. वंस यू आर डन विद द फर्स्ट पैसेज, summarize it in your head. It's exactly what I did, you know. After I read the first stanza, I told you, okay, what is the gist of the first stanza? Why did the author write the first stanza? Second stanza, read it and take 2 seconds to quickly summarize it in your head. Okay, the second stanza was all about this. And keep doing that till the end. Okay, so never skim through the RC. It's just a wastage of time. Do active reading, read it in detail at the first go. Second mistake that people do is don't try to memorize facts. Okay, if there are lots of facts given, it is to make a point. It most likely is an example. What is expected from you is to try and understand the logic and the argument, the main argument that the author is trying to make. Okay, now in order to make you understand his point, his stance, the author may use a lot of arguments, may give you a lot of facts. You don't need to remember those facts. People take a lot of time reading through the RC because they try to keep, you know, okay, ye bhi tha, ye bhi tha. They try to keep it in their conscious mind that I shouldn't forget it. There are very few factual questions in RCs, and if there are, you can always come back and refer to it. You will know which paragraph to go back to it. But don't get too stuck on trying to remembering what the facts are, especially if they are technical in nature. Okay, replace those facts with XYZ. So the author gives XYZ example to prove that this is what the theory is about. In my mind, when I summarize a paragraph, this is how I think. Okay, so the author gave 2 or 3 examples to make this point. He gave certain numbers to explain that this is a very serious problem. What those numbers are, you don't need to remember. Okay, so don't get too stuck in memorizing facts while you are reading the RC. Just try to understand the emotions and the logic behind, you know, why the author is writing what he is writing. Don't get stuck in vocabulary traps. Okay, so a lot of the time people find VARC very difficult because a lot of these, you know, especially if it's, let's say, technical RC, or even when it's abstract RCs. Okay, if it's an RC related to a topic that you are not familiar with, or if there are very, 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 in general, big vocabulary words that are used, sometimes it can throw you off guard. It makes you nervous when you're not able to understand some words in between. Please try and understand individual words in any RC passage are not that important. Okay, again, your job is to understand at the end of all of those paragraphs, what was the central idea that the author was trying to say. One word is not going to change the author's main argument or the point that he was trying to say. Forget about the entire RC. Paragraph bhi samajhna possible hai even if you don't understand 1 or 2 particular words that are given in that paragraph. So if there is a you know, word that is very big for you, or you're not able to understand it, replace it. Replace it with X. Okay, there are certain kinds of people called X who do this, who believe in this, and then try and see what the paragraph is trying to say, and if you're able to make sense of that. Don't get too intimidated, don't get too nervous when you find difficult vocabulary words. RC is not there to test how good your English is. It's there to test whether you're able to understand a flow of argument, a logic that the author is trying to make. Okay, and it is possible to understand that even if you delete those words from that paragraph. So do that. Okay, the next biggest mistake that people do is not understanding the full scope or the purpose of a paragraph. Okay, you get too stuck many times in a certain example that was given, or a counter argument that was given. Okay, so again, whenever an RC is there, okay, so there are multiple paragraphs that are present in the RC. Each paragraph serves a particular purpose. So for example, there will be an introduction paragraph, then there will be a paragraph where the author is going to introduce his main argument, that this is what he believes. Okay, or if it's a factual RC, he will explain the phenomenon or the topic that he is writing on. Then there might be paragraph where he presents, you know, supporting arguments, whatever was his point of view. In order to support that, why he believes so strongly about it, he will give you A, B, C reasons. Okay, he might also give you some counter arguments that, you know, other people may believe this, but this is not true. So there could be a paragraph dedicated to that. There could be a paragraph dedicated to certain examples. So, and after all of that, there will finally be a concluding paragraph, right? So a lot of the times students pick up one or two paragraphs in between, and whatever was the topic and the whatever was written in those one or two paragraph, they feel that the entire RC's purpose is that. Okay, you are not able to understand that that was just a part. It had to play a small part into the in the entire scheme of events, how the argument flowed. Okay, it serves a particular purpose, but the final reason why the author chose to write that RC was something else, and that was just an example that he used. That was just a medium he was using to convince you of a bigger point. Okay, so try to keep a bird's eye view. Okay, don't get too deep. So whenever you have to understand what is the purpose of the paragraph, try and think about what does the author keep coming back to. Okay, if there is something which the author only talks about in one or two paragraph, it cannot be the purpose of the entire RC. So understand the full scope of the RC properly. Okay, don't get just stuck into just one or two very focused topics that the author is talking about. The next one is very important, I think, especially when we are reading an RC on which we know a lot about. Okay, if it's a subject, for example, if I'm going to read a psychology related RC, or if I'm going to read a scientific RC, or if I'm reading, let's say, a political RC, okay, on a topic on which I myself have very deep opinions about, very strong opinions about, whatever I knew from before, I should not let it interfere with understanding what the author is trying to say. You know, especially if the author is trying to take a stance which is very different from what you believe in. Okay, so I feel that sometimes students find it very difficult to keep their own opinions, their own understanding, their own emotions about what they feel about the topic separated from what the author is trying to tell you. So you have to allow the author to persuade you with what the author is trying to tell you. Okay, for those 8 minutes, for those 10 minutes when you are attempting that RC, you are not you. You are a blank slate. Okay, so if the author is going to say genocide is good, if the author is going to say Hitler was a great guy, and he is going to give you 20 reasons why he feels that Hitler was the greatest man on earth, okay, you have to allow the author to persuade you to do so just for those 10 minutes. Keep away your own judgments, keep away your own emotions and opinions to the side, and just listen to author's perspective. Become the author. Put yourself in his shoes. Okay, so don't let it interfere. Only then you will understand questions like, what is the author trying to say, or which of these arguments is going to support author's argument or undermine author's argument. You have to become the author. Okay, so it doesn't matter what topic it is, it doesn't matter whether what you know is something very different or opposite of what is being said. Your job is to interpret what is written in the RC. Okay, so try and keep a very detached and unbiased kind of an attitude when attempting an RC. And the last thing, I've put it here in the last, I should have probably put it somewhere in the top because it's very, very, very important. Never read the options first and then say कि पहले मैं options देख लेता हूँ किस type के questions हैं and उसके बाद RC पढ़ूंगा. Never ever do that mistake. Why? I will tell you. You know, there are a lot of distortions that are given in the options. You know, words that are not present really in the RC, but they are given there in the options to kind of, throw you off track. What happens when you read those options first? All those distortions go there into your head. Okay, so all those distortions get registered in your head, and then you read the RC. Right now, there's a lot of information that is there from the RC, and there's also information that you actually read through those options which may be incorrect. Okay, now sometimes many times you're making the judgment about which option is correct based on your gut feeling that this is what the author meant. You don't know where that judgment is coming from. Did you read that in the actual paragraph, or was it part of some distortion that was given there in the question and the options before? Okay, so you have to be a blank slate when you start reading the RC. First read the RC, understand what the author is trying to say, and then when you go to the options, you'll be able to judge which option is correct and which is incorrect based on what you read in the RC. But first, if you read the wrong things that are given in the options, somewhere they confuse you because they get registered in the brain and then you get confused कि ये actually में author ने बोला था या it's like, you know, if you've seen the movie Inception. Okay, somebody is going to plant those seeds into your head and you will not know where that idea came from. Was it really the author's idea or was it some kind of a distortion that was given in one of the questions and the options that you read? Okay, so never read the options first without reading the passage. Okay, so always passage first. Never skim the passage. Read it properly if you are going to attempt it. Skimming is just a wastage of time. Okay, do not try to memorize facts. Do not get stuck in vocabulary traps. Okay, delete those delete those phrases, not even words. Even if there are phrases that you don't understand, try to replace it with X and still try to see if you can understand what the author is trying to say in that paragraph. Okay, understand that the scope of the RC can be much bigger than what 1 or 2 paragraphs are talking about. All right. So with that, I think those are the things that I can tell you. Krishna is asking how many RCs to do. Krishna, I think you should be practicing 2 to 3 RCs every day, right? Practice 2 to 3 RCs every day along with your DM and LRDI and quant. So you should be practicing some questions of all 4 sections for XAT. Your XAT exam is so close. Practice 3 RCs, make sure they are from a variety of genres. Don't only practice the genre that you are comfortable with. So make sure that you expose yourself to a lot of different genres so you're more comfortable reading about a lot of different topics. Okay? So with that, I am going to end today's session. Thank you so much, and all of you were very patient and lovely, when there were so many technical difficulties initially, and I really want to thank you for that. Okay, so I hope you had a productive session, and I will see you in next class. Okay, bye-bye. Good